Hey, what's up everyone? Doug with Building the Bahamas. Hey, hope you're doing good. You just saw the hype video. It is Super Bowl week, Super Bowl weekend coming up. And would love to hear who you think's going to win. Who do you want to win? So comment down below and let us know who you think's going to win. Even throw in a score if you think that's going to what the score is going to be. So anyway, let's jump into episode 8. First off, I hope you guys have been doing well. I've gotten a lot of great comments, a lot of emails back from you guys, and I really appreciate your support. Keep the emails coming, and I'll answer them just as quickly as I can. But I really appreciate the support on this channel. And again, if you know someone that may benefit from this information, please share this. Please like the channel. It really helps us out getting it out there to other people. So, but today we're going to go over, like I said, types of construction. And I just want to let you guys know I'm not a contractor. I'm not a architect, engineer, anything like that. I want to be 100% upfront. I sell real estate. I'm in the real estate business. I've been a part of new constructions, things like that. So I know a little bit about it as far as putting it together, and I'm really more of a manager and overseeing the process. But I just wanted to let you guys know I'm not a builder by any means. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to refer to a video that I've been watching. I've gotten a lot of great information on different types of construction, and I'm going to show you that video. So I reached out to Matt Reisinger on YouTube. He has a YouTube channel called Build, and he goes over the 3 different types of construction that I recommend really kind of considering when you're building in the Bahamas. So the 3 types, just really to oversee them, and he'll go into depth on them. But real quickly, he goes over ICF, which is concrete, poured in place concrete construction. He goes over SIP panels, which is a structural insulated panel. And then he goes over the traditional sticks, the 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, just a normal wood that we're all accustomed to. So really hope you enjoy this video, and we'll see you at the end of it and answer any questions.
ICF versus SIPs versus traditional framing. This is a question I get all the time. On the Build Show today, we're going to take a deep dive into all 3 of these systems. I've actually built with all 3 of these types of construction over the years. So I have some personal experiences to share with you, as well as some pros and cons for each one of these. Well, let's get going. All right, first up on this video, ICF construction. That's insulated concrete forms. Most of the time when you see these, you're going to see a form that has insulation on the inside and the outside. You're going to pour concrete into the center, and then when you take the bracing away, the insulation stays. So in effect, you've got a concrete house with insulation on the inside and the outside. This is a system that I like for many reasons, but let's start with this one right here. The big pro, of course, is energy efficiency. You know, you've got that continuous insulation on both the inside and the outside. There's no thermal bridging. There's no breaks. This is a really well-insulated house. The big pro, though, when you're talking ICF, I think, is durability. If you saw my videos recently from my trip down to the Dominican Republic, everything down in the DR is basically block construction, concrete block construction, because they know they've got hurricanes, they've got storms, they've got wind. And if we're talking concrete construction, those are going to withstand the storms. Anytime you see a storm blow through Florida and there's a hurricane that goes through, there's always a photo of a neighborhood that's flattened, but there's one ICF house still standing. That's the huge benefit for ICF, is durability. You've got that concrete core there that's really going to withstand all the massive impacts. Storms, fire, wind, even bullets. If you saw my testing video I did a few months ago with Tori Belleci, you know, we were shooting at a wall, and most construction, those bullets are going to go right through. You've got a 6-inch concrete wall. There ain't nothing that's going to go through that. The last 2 things that I want to mention on the pro side of ICF is they make a particularly quiet house. A lot of that is because air sealing is really kind of done for you. Once you stack those cores up, or those forms up rather, and pour that core with concrete, there's really very, very tight airflow in there. But the only place you're going to see air leakage is maybe your punched openings, your windows and doors. And if you do a good job of air sealing those, you've got a naturally tight house, which leads to a very quiet house. And the last pro that I want to mention is I think there is a certain DIY component that I like about it. And I don't mean that you're going to build the house yourself. What I mean is that you're going to order in the blocks that you need, the end pieces, the corners, all these kind of parts and pieces, and you're going to assemble it yourself, just like a traditional framed house. You know, when I order my traditionally framed house from the lumber yard, I'm placing order for 2x6s and zip sheathing, but I'm assembling it all together on the site per my specifications. That's the same thing that's happening with an ICF house. Now, there's a bunch of manufacturers. I'm not going to get into all that. I think for ICF, although this is maybe more in the neutral category, is you want to find a builder or a subcontractor that's built with this before. You don't want to be the guinea pig the first time the builder or the sub has ever used this ICF block before. There's enough intricacies in the system, and if you make a mistake, let's say you pour a wall out of plumb, there's not much you can do to fix that, right? So you really want a builder who's done it before, maybe made the mistakes on someone else's job 5 years ago and had that pain of trying to fix it. So if you could find someone that has some experience, I think there's a lot of pros to this system. But again, don't be the guinea pig. Another con of this system is you really want to be cautious about termites. Termites love tunneling through foam. Now, there's nothing really to eat in that foam, but let's say if you had a wood-framed roof, they can tunnel up through that foam and start chewing on your roof. And this is actually another downside or con, I would say, of ICF is what do you do about the roof? Now, I did a little research for this video. I'd never built one before, but there actually are some roof systems out of ICF. For instance, the guys at Quadlock on their website, they've got a great couple details on ICF roof systems. And I think I'm going to actually get to see one of their jobs under construction when I go to Vancouver in December. I've got a week-long tour coming up in December, so hopefully we'll see some of that. But I think that's a little bit of a con, is what do you do with the roof? So you might check out the ICF roof systems. I think if you're going to build an ICF house and you're doing it for durability and storm-proofness in particular, I think you really ought to consider doing the roof in ICF as well. The last con I want to mention is anytime you build a really high efficiency house, you can have condensation and moisture issues. So if you're going to build an ICF house, you really need to think critically about your mechanicals. You're typically going to need a smaller system when it comes to heating and cooling, but you really want to consider adding a dehumidifier. I've had great success with the Ultra Air models over the years. I use them in all my houses down here in Texas. But even if you're building a house in Minnesota, you most likely are going to need a dehumidifier for an ICF house as well. Okay, next let's move on to SIPS construction. That's a structural insulated panel. Now, I built a SIPS house not too long ago here in Austin, Texas. And when we're talking SIPS, most of the time what you're going to see out there is an OSB outer core and inner core with a center of foam. Now, you could use plywood, you could use all kinds of different options for the inside and outside structure. And in the center, you could use different types of foam. But in general, you've got anywhere from a 4-inch thick to maybe as much as a 10-inch thick wall with massive amounts of foam in the center. A lot of pros to this system. This is a panelized system where you're actually going to build the house on the computer, and a panel manufacturer is going to spit out all these panels and drop them on a truck. So that when you get to the job, the framer is kind of assembling the house that's been pre-built off-site like a big Lego system and putting everything together. Now, a critical component of ICF is the joints, and you really want to make sure that those joints are air sealed correctly. There's a bunch of options out there for that, from pookies to tapes to gasket systems. Do your research because it's critical to make sure you seal those joints, especially in a cold climate. And if you do any research on SIPs, you're going to come across some roof failures that were especially prominent, really more like in the 80s and 90s, but I think they're probably still happening today, where in cold climates, especially Alaska and northern U.S. climates, if you have any air leakage at those seams, it's going to find a cold condensing surface in the wintertime, and you're going to have basically roof rot. So you need to be really cautious about the details when you put that together. Okay, now pros for the SIP system. The first and most obvious one, a massive core of insulation, really, really high R values, and because you've got that continuous OSB on the inside and the outside, air sealing with tape-based systems can be pretty straightforward, and you can get a very airtight and very well insulated shell without having to go through a lot of hoops and do special details. It's pretty straightforward to get a really well insulated, really airtight shell. I also like the roof systems. Now, I started off with kind of a con there about the air sealing on the roofs, but a SIPS roof You can get massive panels, you can crane them in place, you can have all your mechanicals within the envelope of the house, meaning the air conditioned and air sealed envelope. So SIPS roofs, really, that's a huge pro of the system, I think. The last two pros, I think, of the system are cycle time. I think that you can see a reduction in cycle time if you have both a frame carpenter and a panel manufacturer that are in sync and are really delivering things on time and maybe have built with SIPS before. And I think that there's a benefit to having sort of traditional erection methods, right? We've got a crane, we've got framers that have both nails and screws. There's nothing fancy here. It's not like SIPS where you're almost having a concrete guy build the shell of your house. Really, most framers can be trained on how to do SIPS correctly. Which leads me to the next con, is you really need to detail these houses correctly. If you miss a detail, we can have problems. You know, if your major structure is OSB on the outside of the house and you have a leak, there's very little hydric buffer capacity, meaning there's not studs in there that could absorb that water. There's not a concrete core that could absorb that water. And as a result, small problems can lead to bigger problems. And I think that's the downside of SIPS, is you really need to nail the details, because a small problem can lead to a big deal later, including potentially structural failures. And the last con, I think, is probably cost. You know, you're going to be more than traditionally framed here. It's going to be really hard to nail down how much more. I think probably at a minimum you want to assume it's probably 5 to 10% more, but it could be as much as 15 or 20% more for SIPS. Again, comment below if you have special or specific experience, if you're a builder who's done this before. Now, in between these two, and before I get to traditional framed house, I do want to mention a system that kind of doesn't fit with either one of these monikers, and that's with my friends at Bensonwood. You know, they're building houses up in Walpole, New Hampshire, that are sort of a SIPS, sort of a traditional framed house. I built one of them down here in Texas a couple years ago and had an amazing experience, like the polar opposite of my SIPS experience. Super pro team, impressive engineers and staff and architects that helped us get everything together, so that when the panels actually arrived on site, man, everything went together super smooth and easy. And we're talking super insulation and super air tightness. Again, this is not quite the same system though. Stay tuned for some future videos. I'd like to talk more about them. Now last, let's talk traditional frame. 99.999% of the houses built in North America today are traditionally framed houses. And of course, that's the big pro for the system. This is a system that's been around for hundreds of years. America has amazing resources for lumber. We have massive forests that are managed really well. We cut down trees. 20 years later, that tree is regrown and is ready to be reharvested again. So we have great wood resources. Another big pro of wood houses that really they have a lot of capacity for a problem to occur without a failure to happen. As I mentioned earlier, on a SIPS house, if you have small air leakage or small water leakage, that can kind of lead to big problems. On a traditional framed house, we've had massive air leaks for years. We've even had massive water leaks for years that don't always lead to failures. Now, sometimes they do, of course, but I would say if you're going to build a traditionally framed house, don't build it light. You know, don't go with 2x4 construction. At least consider upgrading to 2x6 or 2x8 construction, and consider lots of insulation in the cavity, or even better, lots of insulation on the outside of your house. In fact, you could make a traditionally framed house kind of a half-base SIPS by doing no cavity insulation and massive insulation on the outside. Now, I did a house a couple years ago that I called a perfect wall house, which is based on Joe Stiebrick's concept at Building Science Corporation, where we didn't have any inside insulation, and as a result, we didn't even use any drywall on the inside of the house. Everything is exposed framing-wise on the inside, and then we put massive insulation on the outside, and that led to an incredibly durable house. In fact, Joe Stiebrick says that house could be around for 500 years. Now, that house is only a few years old, so we'll see, but I think there's a lot of lessons there that could be applied to even, quote-unquote, normal traditional frame houses in America. The other big pros, of course, easy to remodel. Trades know it. There's no funky things you need to do when it comes to the electricians, to running plumbing systems. All those things are pretty standard and straightforward, and really most experienced subcontractors in America are going to do a good job for you on that. There's no kind of hidden gotchas on those systems. The other thing I want to mention on traditional framing too is there's been a lot of advances in building materials recently. For instance, I've talked a lot on these videos about zip system sheathing. Huber is one of my sponsors. They've got a relatively recent addition to their team called Zip R panels, which is foam bonded to structural sheathing, where when you install that sheathing on the outside, the foam creates a sandwich on the outside of your framing and gives you a continuous insulation, but also a really, really good water and air seal on the outside of the house in a more quote-unquote traditional way. So there's some additional materials and methods that I've seen out there that I think are making traditional framing more and more efficient, more and more durable, and more understandable and easier for the general public to understand and for builders to adopt those methods. Now let's talk about some cons, though, in traditional framing. I think the number one con has to be durability, right? You've heard me say from my friend David Nicastro, if it can't dry, it's going to die. And that is so true with wood framing. We've got to use really good waterproofing methods on the outside. That's the number one priority for a builder, is the exterior waterproofing. Make sure that bulk water and rain can't get in, making sure that foundations are waterproof. That's our main job as a builder. Almost everything else comes in a distant second or third beyond that when it comes to priorities on the house. And if we do have those problems, that's where rot and mold take a hold. And ultimately, you can't even have structural failures as well as massive indoor air quality issues on traditionally framed houses. So pay attention to the details, especially the waterproofing. That's why I've been such a nerd about that over the years. And you've seen so many videos from me over the last 10 years on how to waterproof correctly, how to install your windows correctly, how to detail your joints and seams, how to air seal correctly. All those things are super important to building a really good traditionally framed house.
Guys, that's it for episode 8 of Building the Bahamas, types of construction. I hope you got a lot out of it. I know I did, and it's really gonna make me think of what type of construction I'm gonna go with on our second build. And once we do start that, which hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll be on the island the whole time when it's being built, and I'd love to document that and continue this Building the Bahamas page and channel. So hope you guys have hope you have a great weekend. If you have any questions, comment down below. Email me at buildingthebahamas@gmail.com, buildingthebahamas@gmail.com. I'll answer your questions, point you in the right direction, show you some maybe off-market listings as well, and then we'll go from there. But look forward to seeing you episode 9, where we'll go over the rental numbers, VRBO, and all that, how that works, and kind of share my numbers with you as well. So anyway, hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Take care.